I often talk about how making gradual improvements to your way of eating can lead to a lack of results. But what happens if you focus too strongly on food rule perfection? For most people, it's not good either. Let's talk about it. Hey everybody, this is Dylan. In my last plant rant, I talked about how a lot of people like to gradually improve their eating habits by eliminating the unhealthy food over various stages. And then I listed off the foods in the order that I would remove them if I were to take this approach. For example, first get rid of the dairy, then the rest of the animal products, then all the fake vegan food, then the oil, on and on. You can keep getting cleaner and cleaner, or closer and closer to your goal weight, or healthier and healthier, whatever you want to call it, until you finally reached your lifelong sustainable diet and lifestyle. But I also talked about how doing this in stages can be very challenging for people, because at first, if you're just starting to clean things up little by little, you're not going to get all that much health improvement. For example, you could take a relatively huge step by switching from a standard American diet to a vegan diet, but the problem is most people still eat a ton of junk food on a vegan diet, so you're not really going to get much health benefit out of this. So if health was your big motivator for this change, but your health doesn't really improve much, then you're likely to fail because there was no payoff. There was nothing that made it worthwhile. So you need to do something that gets you the big reward that you seek, whether it's eliminating pain, losing weight, getting off your meds, whatever it is, you've got to make the changes that will actually get you to experience that thing in order for this to become a lifelong sustainable habit. Let's take an example in my own life that is somewhat unrelated. I've always been super environmental. You know, we all learn how to recycle, but I took it seriously. And then in my 20s, I started a business and I was installing solar panels on rooftops, so I was feeling pretty good about my environmental impact. But then I learned how terrible animal agriculture is on the planet, and I was like, oh man, there is way more that I could be doing that would be way more impactful, and this ended up being a huge motivator for my going vegan. And when I finally did, my emotional reward was huge because I knew I'd just done like the most impactful thing I could as far as the environment is concerned. Then I played around with some other little things like composting or experimenting with really water efficient food growing like hydroponics, but none of them brought the same reward as going vegan did. So I wasn't all that motivated to keep doing it for fear of losing my mind or just dedicating too much time to this cause. And I'm just talking about me and my own sense of reward that I get from these different actions. It may be that composting brings you great reward as far as environmentalism is concerned, and that is great. You should keep doing it. I should too, frankly, but I just haven't. And I'm trying to explain why it went down this way for me. This is why self-awareness and reflection is so important when you're trying to make these huge life changes. You want to pick the things that will result in the greatest amount of reward possible, because then you'll sustain those habits forever. That's just human nature. I'm going to make a little chart, and along the bottom I'm going to list out all the environmental changes that I made, such as recycling, solar, vegan, composting, and hydroponics, just to keep it simple. And on the vertical axis, I'll put the emotional reward that results from these changes. This is the big payoff. And then along the top here, I'm going to put this dotted line across. That's like our maximum achievable reward that is like infinity, okay? So if I start at the beginning, I haven't made any changes, so therefore I don't have any payoff. There's no reward for that. But then I add recycling, and I get a little bit of reward, cool. Then I do the solar business, ooh, I get a little more reward. That feels pretty good. But then I go vegan, and boom, my emotional reward is like through the roof. And remember, this is like your perceived reward. It doesn't matter if you're right or not. This is just what you believe. If you fully believe and feel happiness because of some change you've made, then that's the payoff. It doesn't matter whether you were right or not. And then I add a few more things like the composting. I get a little bit more reward, and then I add the hydroponics and the gardening and all that, and I get a little bit more reward, but really it's nothing compared to the vegan thing. So now we have a visual of what is commonly referred to as the law of diminishing returns. The first stage with the recycling and the solar is just not going far enough. Then I make this legit change going vegan, and we see the area where we have the largest return. This could be several things, right? It doesn't have to just be one action that gets you the huge return. It could be a few different things combined. And then I add on a few more things such as the composting, and I get a little bit more reward, but not much. So this is the area where we've hit the diminishing returns. We can keep putting in a whole bunch of effort, but there's only so much we're going to get out of it at this point. And then some people will keep going even more, seeking perfection, making these little changes until they'll finally start to hit negative returns because we've lost our minds, we've overcomplicated the whole thing, and here's where we risk just falling off altogether and giving up even on the things that led to those large returns where we were at that happy, balanced place. And here's the problem. So now let's apply this same thinking to my own health adventure. So along the bottom of this chart, I'll put all my various health changes that I've made throughout the years, and then the vertical axis again will be our emotional reward, physical and emotional reward, right? My first health change was juicing while eating a standard American diet. And when I went into this change, I thought, oh, this one thing is going to result in the maximum amount of change. I mean, isn't that how it goes? You hypothesize that you're going to make this change, and it's going to be like mission accomplished, yay, I did it. But in reality, it doesn't really work out that way. You have to experiment through these different different changes. Some will have a modest change, while others will explode through the roof. So that's where we're going. So I did the juicing, and sure enough, I only experienced a modest payoff. Then I removed all animal products from my diet. I ate a vegan diet, but it was a junk food vegan diet, and sure enough, that also resulted in a little bit of reward, but not very much. And because I wasn't experiencing all that much reward from my effort, the juicing and the junk food vegan diet, I wasn't able to maintain it. I kept going back and eating meat, and this went on for like 3 years, trying to put in the effort to get a little bit of reward, and it just wasn't going anywhere. So finally, at the end of this multi-year fail period, I came up with a new hypothesis that I thought might result in this big reward, the big payoff that would make it all worthwhile. And that was to try out this Dr. John McDougall starch solution, vegan oil-free type of diet. I gave this new way of eating a shot, and sure enough, the reward was through the roof. It was essentially my maximum amount of reward, and this is the same experience that almost everyone I know has had when they do this as well. Sure, I've tried some other little things that we'll talk about since then, but they've all resulted in diminishing returns, and I've always gravitated back to my normal, whole food, vegan oil-free diet. And here's where it's important to consider some little variations to this that will yield better payoff for you depending on where your baseline health is. Before I went vegan oil-free, my weight was going up, my cholesterol and blood pressure were going up a little bit, and just switching to an oil-free diet was all I needed to get things back in order. But let's say you're trying to reverse heart disease, which is something that I have never had. A vegan oil-free diet is going to be a lot better than like a standard American diet, but it may not go far enough. You may need to remove the overt fats like the nuts and seeds and avocado, like Dr. Ornish and Dr. Esselstyn recommend for reversing heart disease, in order for you to feel the real reward to make it all worthwhile. This is why it's really important to spend some time educating yourself so that you can manage your expectations and come up with these little experiments to run so that you can finally find the one that results in the most possible reward so that it all just feels easy going forward. So let's go back to my own health journey, and I'll show you what can happen if you keep trying to pile on these little changes, assuming that they're going to result in the same amount of return when they're not. A great example for a lot of people is the whole organic versus non-organic food thing. Obviously, there is no question eating organic produce is objectively better than eating non-organic produce, but it's not a question of whether one is better than the other. It's a question of whether one will result in enough reward to make it worthwhile, to make it worth the trouble to do for the rest of your life. For some people that are sensitive to pesticides, whether emotionally or physically or both, it doesn't matter, then going organic is going to be worth it. It's going to result in the amount of reward that you need in order for that to feel like it was worth the cost and the energy. Whereas for others, it just won't be there. So for me, I'm going to try to go organic when I can. I'm going to try to replace all the dirtiest foods with the organic ones, but I'm not going to strive for perfection in this area because it will result in diminishing returns. It just won't feel worth it to me. And some people will take it even further, and they will habitualize the act of what I call nutrient chasing. I don't know if habitualize is a word. I don't think it is, but I like it, and I'm going to use it. Nutrient chasing is trying to adhere perfectly to something like Dr. Michael Greger's Daily Dozen or Dr. Joel Fuhrman's G-Bombs. I love these two doctors to bits. They're trying to tell us the best way to do things, but sometimes that's just not sustainable. And I'm not saying it's bad to go after the Daily Dozen. If putting forth that kind of an effort results in the reward that you seek, then wonderful. It's working for you and it's sustainable for you, and I'm not trying to criticize you, but for a lot of people, it doesn't happen that way, and it actually can result in the diminishing returns and then eventually negative returns if you fall off, give up because you've just added too much complexity into your life. And if there is such thing as orthorexia, then this is where it could potentially get you into trouble by sabotaging your progress. So where do I stop? I stop at the spot before I start hitting the diminishing returns, which for me is a vegan oil-free diet. Yeah, I try to do the organic thing when I can. I take my B12 supplement. I eat my flax seeds and chia seeds and all that. But for the most part, I just eat the food. And for the vast majority of people, that's going to be your best bet too. Your goal should be to make the changes to your diet and lifestyle that result in the maximum amount of reward with the least amount of complexity. And for most people, that's a vegan oil-free diet with a reasonable amount of physical exercise every day or most days, and then a lot of good restful sleep. This will allow you to avoid the law of diminishing returns as well as the inevitable failure that will come with working too hard to be perfect. And if you absolutely have to be perfect in order to be happy, then I'd encourage you to redefine perfect as adhering to like a reasonable set of sustainable food rules without fail for the rest of your life. Call that perfect. But don't seek the type of perfection that means choosing these far too complicated food rules under the guise of achieving immortality, because you're just going to lose your mind and it's not going to have any real measurable effect on your lifespan anyway. Please click right here to check out my other plant rants on this topic, and I'll see you on the next video. Thanks for watching. Bye.